Have you ever answered a phone call meant for someone else and discovered that your entire life was a lie? That the people closest to you can inflict the deepest wounds. I am Elena, 34 years old, and I thought I had everything figured out. Married to my college sweetheart Derek for 9 years. Mother to the most incredible twin boys in the world. Daughter to parents who still acted like newlyweds after 38 years together. The morning light streamed through my kitchen window in Willowbrook, painting everything in that soft golden glow that used to make me feel completely safe. It was supposed to be just another Tuesday morning. Coffee brewing, pancakes on the griddle, the familiar chaos of getting my twin 7-year-olds ready for school. My husband Derek was upstairs getting dressed, probably checking his phone like he did every morning before work. A routine we'd perfected over 9 years of marriage. "Mom, someone's calling Daddy's phone," my son Tyler called from the living room, followed immediately by his twin brother Kyle echoing the same thing. The phone was ringing really loudly on the coffee table where Derek had left it the night before. I dried my hands on the kitchen towel, the blue one with tiny anchors that my mother-in-law had given us last Christmas, and patted across our hardwood floors in my fuzzy slippers. Derek was particular about his phone, always keeping it close, always answering it himself. But the shower was running upstairs, and whoever was calling seemed persistent. I picked up the phone without checking the caller ID. "Hello." Silence stretched across the line, broken only by the faint sound of someone breathing. Then, soft as velvet and devastating as a blade through my heart, came the words that would haunt me forever. "Sweetheart, you left your ring and watch on my nightstand again." My blood turned to ice. The voice was gentle, intimate, speaking to someone they clearly loved, someone they thought was Derek. I wanted to speak, to correct the mistake, but the voice seemed familiar, oblivious to my shock. "I miss you already. Can't wait to see you tonight." The line went dead. I stood there in my living room, surrounded by evidence of our happy life. Family photos covering the mantel. The boys' artwork taped to the refrigerator. Derek's reading glasses folded neatly on the side table. My entire world had just shifted on its axis. The voice. Sweet Jesus, the voice. I knew that voice better than my own. I'd heard it at every family gathering, every holiday dinner, every celebration and crisis that had shaped my life. I'd heard it whisper bedtime stories to my babies, offer comfort during my miscarriage, share secrets over late-night phone calls when I was struggling with postpartum depression. My hands shook so violently I nearly dropped the phone. My breath came in short, shallow gasps, and for a moment, I thought I might collapse right there on our Persian rug. The one Derek and I had bought together on our honeymoon in Morocco. Because that voice, that loving, intimate voice whispering sweet promises to my husband, belonged to someone who should never speak to Derek that way. Someone who sat at our dinner table every Sunday. Someone who babysat my children. Someone who called me baby girl, and brought homemade pies and knew every detail of my marriage, my hopes, my fears. Someone I trusted with my life. The sound of the shower stopping upstairs made me jump. Derek would be down in 5 minutes, hair still damp, smile bright, asking what was for breakfast like he had every morning for the past 9 years. I looked at his phone in my hand, then at my twin boys eating cereal at the kitchen table, innocent and beautiful and completely unaware that their mother's heart was breaking into 1,000 pieces. How long had this been going on? How many lies had I swallowed? How many times had I welcomed my betrayer into my home with open arms? And most terrifying of all, what else didn't I know? 6 months earlier, if someone had asked me to describe my life, I would have smiled and said I was living the dream. We lived in a beautiful craftsman home in Willowbrook Heights, the kind of neighborhood where kids still played outside until dark and neighbors brought soup when someone was sick. I worked part-time as a freelance photographer, specializing in family portraits, which allowed me to be present for school events and soccer games, and all those precious moments that make up childhood. Derek was everything I'd dreamed of in a husband. Tall and athletic with warm hazel eyes and a smile that could light up any room. He worked as a sports medicine therapist at the regional medical center, helping athletes recover from injuries and get back to doing what they loved. He was patient and kind, the type of man who still brought me coffee in bed on weekends and left little love notes in my camera bag. Our boys, Tyler and Kyle, had just turned 7. Tyler was our bookworm, always asking deep questions about everything from dinosaurs to space travel. Kyle was our entertainer, the one who could make anyone laugh with his impressions and goofy dance moves. They both had Derek's hazel eyes and my determined streak. Sunday dinners were sacred in our house. Every week, my parents Margaret and Robert would come over, along with my Aunt Catherine, and sometimes her husband Frank when he wasn't traveling for business. Frank was a project manager for construction companies, constantly flying off to oversee building projects in different states. Sweet man, but absent more often than present. Aunt Catherine was my mother's younger sister, and from the time I was little, she'd been like a second mother to me. She never had children of her own, something that always brought a shadow of sadness to her eyes during family gatherings, but she channeled all that maternal love into being the world's most devoted aunt and great-aunt. She'd appear at our house with surprise gifts, volunteer to babysit when Derek and I needed date nights, remember every milestone in our lives. When I struggled with anxiety after the twins were born, she came over every single day for 3 weeks, holding babies and making sure I ate and showered, and remembered I was more than just an exhausted new mother. Family is everything, she'd always say, pulling me into her warm hugs. We protect each other no matter what. I believed her completely. God help me. I believed every single word. The Sunday before that devastating Tuesday morning, we'd had one of our typical family dinners. Mom had cooked her famous pot roast. Dad had entertained the boys with his collection of terrible puns that made them giggle until they got hiccups. And Aunt Catherine had brought homemade apple turnovers that vanished within minutes. You spoil them rotten, I'd laughed, watching Tyler and Kyle devour the pastries with sticky fingers and huge grins. That's what great aunts are for, she'd replied, messing up Kyle's hair affectionately. Then she'd looked at Derek with what I thought was simple family fondness. You're so fortunate to have such a devoted husband, Elena. Don't ever take that for granted. Never, I'd said, reaching over to squeeze Derek's hand. He'd squeezed back, but now I remembered how his eyes had shifted away from mine, how he'd seemed distracted during dinner, checking his phone more than usual. How had I missed it? How had I been so completely blind? That night, after everyone had gone home and the boys were asleep, I'd found Derek on our back deck staring up at the stars. Everything all right? I'd asked, settling into the chair beside him. Just thinking, he'd said, about how perfect we have it. This life, this family. Sometimes I wonder if I deserve all this happiness. I'd thought it was sweet, this moment of gratitude from my husband. I'd kissed his temple and told him he deserved every joy in the world. If I'd known what he was really thinking about, who he was really thinking about, I would have packed the boys and run that very night. But I didn't know. I was still living in my perfect bubble where family meant everything and love was sacred, and the people you trusted most would never, ever shatter your heart into pieces. The bubble was about to explode. After that devastating phone call, I had exactly 4 minutes to compose myself before Derek came downstairs. for minutes to hide the fact that my entire world had just cracked down the middle. I placed his phone back on the coffee table exactly where I'd found it and forced myself to move normally, to breathe normally, to be the wife and mother I'd been just 5 minutes earlier. "Morning, gorgeous," Derek said as he entered the kitchen, hair still damp from his shower. He kissed my cheek like always, but I flinched before I could stop myself. "You okay?" he asked, and I heard something in his voice. Concern, but also wariness. "Fine," I managed. "Just thinking about my client meeting for the Henderson anniversary shoot." It was a lie. I'd finished planning that session 3 days ago. But Derek nodded and grabbed his travel mug, seemingly relieved by the explanation. "Boys, 5 minutes until we leave for school," he called out. Tyler and Kyle came racing in, backpacks bouncing, Tyler clutching a science book, and Kyle already chattering about the art project due Friday. I watched this morning routine play out like I had hundreds of times before, but everything felt different now. Wrong. Like I was watching strangers perform a play about my life. When Derek reached for his phone, my heart pounded against my ribs. Would it ring again? Would she call back? But he just glanced at the screen and slipped it into his pocket. "See you tonight," he said, kissing my forehead. "I love you." The words felt like shards of glass in my chest. How could he say that to me when he was saying it to someone else? When that someone else was... I couldn't even think it. Not yet. I needed proof. I needed to be absolutely certain before I let this suspicion destroy everything. But as I watched him walk out the door with our boys, joking about something that made them laugh, I felt the first crack of what would become a complete collapse. The day stretched endlessly ahead of me. I tried to work on editing photos from a recent wedding, but every time I opened my laptop, my mind wandered back to that voice. That familiar, beloved voice speaking words that should never have been spoken. I found myself moving through our house like a detective in my own life, seeing things I'd never noticed before. Derek's phone always faced down on surfaces now. His new habit of taking calls outside, claiming they were work-related. The way he'd started working late more often, staying at the clinic for paperwork or training sessions. And the gifts. Small things I'd attributed to his thoughtfulness. New workout clothes because I thought you'd look amazing in this color. A bracelet just because I saw it and thought of you. Dinners at fancier restaurants for no particular occasion. Guilt gifts. The realization hit me like a physical blow. He was buying me presents to ease his conscience. By the time the boys came home from school, I felt like I was barely holding myself together. They burst through the door full of energy and stories about their day, and I forced myself to listen, to respond appropriately, to be their mother even though my world was crumbling. "Mom, can Aunt Catherine come over this weekend?" Kyle asked while I helped him with homework. She promised to teach me how to make those turnovers. The mention of her name sent ice through my veins. "We'll see, sweetie," I managed. "She's the coolest," Tyler added, not looking up from his math problems. "I hope when I grow up, I find someone as awesome as Aunt Catherine to marry." I had to excuse myself to the bathroom, where I sat on the edge of the tub and cried as quietly as possible, my whole body shaking with the effort of keeping it contained. That night, after the boys were in bed, I sat across from Derek at our kitchen table, watching him review patient charts and make notes in his careful handwriting. He looked so normal, so much like the man I'd fallen in love with, that for a moment I almost convinced myself I'd imagined everything. "Derek," I said softly. He looked up, pen still poised over his papers. "Do you love me?" Something flickered across his face. Surprise, guilt, something I couldn't quite identify. "Of course I love you. What kind of question is that?" "I don't know," I said truthfully. "I've just been thinking about us lately, about our marriage." Are you happy? He set down his pen and reached across the table to take my hand. His touch, once so comforting, now felt foreign. Elena, where is this coming from? Did I do something wrong? The concern in his voice sounded genuine, and for a wild moment, I considered telling him everything. About the phone call, about my suspicions, about the way my heart felt like it was being slowly crushed. But I couldn't. Not yet. Because if I was wrong, if somehow impossibly I was wrong, I would have destroyed our marriage over nothing. And if I was right, I needed to be smart about what came next. No, I said finally. You didn't do anything wrong. I love you. I love our family. I want to make sure we never take that for granted. He squeezed my hand, but his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. We won't. I promise. Another lie. I was becoming an expert at recognizing them. That night, I lay awake listening to Derek breathe beside me, wondering how long he'd been deceiving me, wondering if Catherine was just the latest or if there had been others, wondering if anything about our life together had been real. But mostly I wondered about her, about Aunt Catherine, who had held me when I cried, who had celebrated every milestone in my life, who had sat at my kitchen table just days ago and looked me in the eye while planning her next meeting with my husband. How could someone do that? How could someone who claimed to love you destroy you so systematically? As the hours ticked by and dawn approached, I made a decision. I was going to find out the truth. All of it. And when I did, there was going to be consequences they never saw coming. The next morning, after Derek left for work and the boys for school, I sat in my empty house with a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago, trying to decide where to start. I could confront him directly, but he'd just deny it. I could confront her, but without proof, she'd deny it too. And if I was wrong? God, what if I was somehow wrong? I'd have accused my aunt of sleeping with my husband based on nothing more than a phone call. But I wasn't wrong. Deep in my bones, in that place where instinct lives, I knew I wasn't wrong. I started with Derek's laptop. We'd always shared passwords, a sign of trust in our marriage that now felt like bitter irony. His computer was mostly work files and photos of the boys, but I noticed he'd recently cleared his browser history. That was new. Derek wasn't particularly tech-savvy. He usually let months of browsing data accumulate without thinking about it. His email was clean too. Suspiciously clean. No personal messages older than a week. Nothing that seemed remotely romantic or secretive. But there was a new folder I'd never seen before labeled CME credits. Continuing medical education. It was empty. My hands trembled as I checked his social media accounts. Everything looked normal. Family photos, work updates, the occasional funny video. But when I looked at his private message history, my heart sank. There were deleted conversations. Lots of them. The message threads showed gaps where entire exchanges had been removed. I was no detective, but I wasn't stupid either. People don't delete innocent conversations. My phone buzzed with a text message, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. It was from Aunt Catherine. Hi, sweetheart. Was thinking of dropping by this afternoon with some of that lemon cake you love. Would that work? I stared at the message, my stomach churning. She wanted to come over, to sit in my kitchen and smile at me and ask about my day, all while carrying on an affair with my husband. I typed back, actually not feeling great today. Rain check. Her response came immediately. Oh no. What's wrong? Do you need me to pick up the boys from school? Even now, even knowing what I knew, she was still playing the role of the caring aunt. It was almost impressive in a sick way. Just tired. I'll be fine. Take care of yourself, honey. Love you. The word love made me want to hurl my phone across the room. I spent the rest of the morning going through everything I could think of. credit card statements, phone records, anything that might give me a clue about what had been happening under my nose. The phone records were revealing. Over the past 6 months, there had been dozens of calls and texts between Derek's number and one I recognized as Catherine's. Many during work, hours when I would have assumed he was with patients. Some late at night after I'd gone to bed. I printed everything out, my hands steady now that I had a task to focus on. Evidence. I was building a case like I was preparing for trial. The credit card statements showed something interesting too. Charges at restaurants I'd never been to, always for 2 people. A florist I didn't recognize. A jewelry store purchase from 2 months ago. The same week he'd given me that just because bracelet. He'd bought us both gifts. The thought made me physically ill. When the boys came home from school, I tried to act normal, but Tyler, perceptive as always, noticed something was off. "Mom, your eyes look red. Are you getting sick?" "Just allergies, baby," I lied, pulling him in for a hug. He smelled like playground mulch and innocence, and I held him a little too tight. "Can we call Aunt Catherine?" Kyle asked. "I want to tell her about the story I wrote in English class." The casual way they loved her, trusted her, made everything so much worse. She wasn't just betraying me, she was betraying them too. They adored her, and she was helping to destroy their family. "Maybe later," I said. "Right now, let's focus on homework." That evening, Derek came home with flowers. Grocery store roses, but flowers nonetheless. Another guilt gift. "What's the occasion?" I asked, though I already knew. "No occasion. Just wanted to remind my beautiful wife that I love her." The performance was getting exhausting for both of us, I suspected. We had dinner like a normal family. We helped the boys with homework like normal parents. We watched a movie together like a normal couple. But underneath it all, I felt like I was drowning in deception. After the boys were asleep, I made a decision. I needed help, and there was only one person I could trust with this nightmare. I called my father. "Dad, it's me. I need to talk to you about something serious. Can you come over tomorrow while Derek's at work?" Robert Martinez had been my anchor my entire life. If anyone could help me figure out what to do next, it was him. "Of course, Mija," he said, and I could hear the concern in his voice. "Is everything all right?" "No," I said, and it was the first completely honest thing I'd said all day. "Everything is very much not all right." My father arrived the next morning at exactly 10 a.m., carrying 2 cups of coffee from our favorite cafe and wearing the worried expression I remembered from my teenage years whenever I'd called him for help. Robert Martinez was 58 years old, a retired firefighter with weathered hands and the kind of steady presence that made you feel safe just by being in the room with him. He'd taught me how to change a tire and throw a punch and never let anyone make me feel small. If there was anyone in the world I could trust with this nightmare, it was him. "Talk to me, sweetheart," he said, settling into his usual spot at our kitchen table. I told him everything. About the phone call, about the voice I'd recognized, about all the evidence I'd gathered over the past 2 days. I watched his face change as I spoke, watched him age 10 years in 10 minutes. When I finished, he sat quietly for a long moment, staring into his coffee cup like it might contain answers. "You're certain it was her voice?" he asked finally. "I'm certain." He nodded slowly. "How long do you think this has been going on?" I pulled out the phone records I'd printed. Based on this, at least 6 months. Maybe longer. Dad studied the pages, his jaw tightening as he took in the frequency of the calls, the timing, the pattern of deception that was right there in black and white. "Son of a bitch," he muttered, and I'd rarely heard my father curse. "Sorry, Mija. I shouldn't have said that." "It's okay, Dad. I've been thinking worse things." He looked up at me, and I saw something fierce and protective in his eyes that reminded me why I'd always felt so safe as his daughter. "What do you want to do?" he asked. It was the question I'd been asking myself for 2 days. What did I want? Justice? Revenge? Just the truth? "I want proof," I said. "Proof that no one can deny or explain away. And then I want them to face consequences for what they've done." "What kind of consequences?" I thought about my boys sleeping peacefully upstairs. About the life we'd built that was all based on lies. About the sister my mother loved and trusted who had been betraying our entire family. "I want him gone," I said. "Out of my life, out of my house, out of my children's daily routine. I want a divorce that protects me and the boys financially. And I want everyone to know exactly what they did." Dad nodded approvingly. "That sounds like a plan. But Elena, if you're going to do this, you need to be strategic about it. You can't let emotions drive your decisions." "I know. Do you? Because right now you're hurt and angry, and those are valid feelings. But if you want to come out of this in the best position possible, you need to think like a chess player, not a victim." He was right. I'd spent 48 hours in emotional freefall. Now I needed to get tactical. "What would you do?" I asked. Dad leaned back in his chair, and I could see his mind working. "First, you need a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, someone who specializes in divorce cases and knows how to protect your interests. Second, you need more evidence. Photos, recorded conversations, something that makes their affair undeniable. Third, you need to protect your assets. Make sure he can't drain bank accounts or hide money. And Mom, this was the part that terrified me most. My mother, Margaret, adored her sister. They talked every day, had lunch twice a week, shared everything. Learning that Catherine had betrayed our family would destroy her. Dad's expression softened. "We'll tell your mother when the time is right. But Elena, she's going to need time to process this. Catherine isn't just your aunt. She's been Margaret's closest friend for 55 years. I know, but she deserves to know the truth." "She does. But let's get all our evidence lined up first." We spent the rest of the morning planning. Dad gave me the name of a lawyer he'd heard excellent things about, Diana Rodriguez, who had a reputation for being brilliant, thorough, and absolutely ruthless when her clients were being wronged. "She helped my buddy Carlos's daughter with her divorce last year," he said. "Took that cheating husband for everything he was worth." By the time Dad left, I felt something I hadn't felt in days. Not hope that my marriage could be saved, that was dead and buried, but hope that I could get through this and build something better on the other side. That afternoon, I called Diana Rodriguez's office. "Rodriguez Family Law," a professional voice answered. "I'd like to schedule an appointment with Ms. Rodriguez. It's regarding a divorce." "Of course. Can I get some basic information?" As I gave my name and details, I felt like I was crossing a bridge with no way back. But for the first time since Tuesday morning, I wasn't terrified of what lay ahead. I was ready to fight. Diana Rodriguez's office was nothing like what I'd expected. Instead of the cold, intimidating law firm atmosphere I'd imagined, her space felt warm and welcoming. Plants lined the windows, family photos sat on her desk, and the chairs were actually comfortable. Diana herself was a surprise too. Probably in her early 40s, with intelligent eyes behind designer glasses and a handshake that conveyed both strength and compassion. "Thank you for seeing me on such short notice," I said as she closed the door behind us. "Your father spoke very highly of you when he called," she replied, settling behind her desk. "He also mentioned you're dealing with some complicated family dynamics." I'd spent the drive over practicing what I would say, but now that I was here, the words felt inadequate. "My husband is having an affair," I said simply. "With my aunt." Diana's expression didn't change, but I saw her pick up a pen and pull a legal pad closer. "Tell me everything." So I did. For the third time in a week, I told the whole sordid story. The phone call, the investigation, the evidence I'd gathered. Diana took notes, asked clarifying questions, and never once looked shocked or judgmental. When I finished, she set down her pen and looked at me directly. "Elena, I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. What do you want to accomplish here?" "I want a divorce. I want custody of my children. I want to make sure I'm financially protected. Those are all achievable goals. But there's something else I'm hearing. You want justice. You want them to face real consequences for this betrayal. Is that accurate?" I nodded. "Good," she said, and there was steel in her voice now. "Because in my experience, people who cheat don't just hurt their spouses. They hurt entire families. Children suffer. Extended families are destroyed. And the cheaters often walk away thinking they can just start fresh without facing any real consequences. So you'll help me? I'll help you. But we're going to do this right. By the time we're finished, your husband will understand exactly what he's lost, and your aunt will understand exactly what her choices have cost her." Over the next hour, Diana outlined a strategy that was both comprehensive and surgical. We would gather irrefutable evidence of the affair. We would document Derek's assets and income to ensure he couldn't hide money. We would build a custody case that prioritized the boy's well-being. And we would make sure that when the truth came out, it came out in a way that protected me and the children while exposing the full scope of the betrayal. "I'm going to need you to be stronger than you've ever been," Diana warned me. "This process is going to be emotionally brutal. There will be times when you want to give up, when the easier path seems like letting them get away with it. Can you handle that?" I thought about my boys, about the life I wanted to build for them, about the example I wanted to set. "Yes," I said. "I can handle it." "Then let's get to work." The first step was hiring a private investigator. Diana recommended someone she'd worked with before, a former police detective named Marcus Webb, who specialized in matrimonial cases. "He's discreet, thorough, and he documents everything properly so it can be used in court," she explained. "If your husband and aunt are meeting regularly, Marcus will get the proof we need." The second step was financial protection. We would monitor all bank accounts and credit cards for unusual activity. I would start documenting household expenses and the boys' needs, and I would quietly gather information about Derek's income, benefits, and retirement accounts. "Don't change your behavior at home," Diana advised. "Act like everything is normal. The element of surprise is our biggest advantage right now." As I left her office, I felt like I was carrying a secret weapon. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't just reacting to what was happening to me. I was taking control. That night, I cooked Derek's favorite dinner and asked about his day like nothing had changed. I helped the boys with homework and listened to their chatter about school and friends. I even laughed at Kyle's joke about a penguin trying to fly. But inside, I was counting down the days until I could stop pretending. 3 days later, Marcus Webb called with his first report. "I've been following your husband for 72 hours, he said in his matter-of-fact way. "Yesterday at 2:30 p.m., he met a woman matching your aunt's description at the Grandview Hotel. They stayed for 2 hours. I have photographs." My stomach dropped even though this was exactly what I'd expected to hear. "Are you certain it's her?" "Based on the photos you provided, yes, I'm certain." "What happens now?" "I continue surveillance for another week to establish a pattern. Then we'll have everything we need." When I hung up, I sat in my car in the grocery store parking lot and cried. Not because I was surprised, I'd known this was coming, but because it made everything real and final and irreversible. My marriage was over. My family was broken, and soon everyone would know it. But I was going to make sure that when the dust settled, my boys and I would be okay, even if it meant burning everything else to the ground. The photographs arrived in a manila envelope that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Marcus had included a note. "I'm sorry you have to see these, but you asked for irrefutable proof. This should be sufficient for your purposes." I waited until the boys were at school and Derek was at work before I opened it. Even preparing myself didn't make it easier. There they were in crisp color photos that left no room for doubt or misinterpretation. Derek and Aunt Catherine entering the Grandview Hotel together, her hand on his arm. Him looking around nervously before they went inside. Another photo of them in the hotel restaurant, leaning across the table toward each other like lovers. The worst one showed them in the hotel parking lot afterward. They were embracing, and she was reaching up to touch his face in a gesture so intimate it made my chest physically ache. They looked like people who had been together for years, comfortable and familiar with each other's bodies. I set the photos aside and picked up Marcus's written report. The facts were laid out in clinical detail. Subject met female at hotel on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday of surveillance period. Average duration of meetings, 2.5 hours. Observed intimate physical contact consistent with romantic relationship. Female's license plate confirmed as registered to Catherine Walsh, subject's wife's aunt. Hotel records show room registered under false name, but paid for with subject's credit card. The false name. They'd been careful about some things but sloppy about others. Derek had paid for their affair with our joint credit card. Money that should have gone to our children's future, to our mortgage, to our life together. My phone buzzed with a text from the woman whose face was now burned into my memory in the worst possible way. "Hi, sweetie. The boys left their baseball gloves at my house after last weekend. Should I drop them off or do you want to pick them up?" I stared at the message, remembering last Saturday. Derek had taken the boys to Catherine's house for what he said was a family barbecue. "Just the guys," he'd said, giving me a chance to relax and have some alone time. Except now I knew that while my children were playing in her backyard, their father was planning his next hotel encounter with their great-aunt. The level of deception was staggering. I typed back, "I'll pick them up this afternoon." I needed to see her, to look her in the eye now that I knew what she was. I wasn't ready to confront her yet. Diana had been very clear about not showing our hand, but I needed to see if I could detect any guilt, any remorse, any sign of the woman I thought I knew. Catherine's house was a cozy ranch in an established neighborhood, the kind of place where she'd lived since marrying Frank 22 years ago. I'd spent countless hours here over the years. Holiday celebrations, birthday parties, quiet afternoons when she'd watch the boys sew Derek and I could have date nights. She opened the door with her usual bright smile, and for a moment, looking at her familiar face, I almost convinced myself I'd imagined everything. "Elena, come in," she said, stepping aside to let me into the living room where I'd sat 1,000 times before. "I just made some sweet tea. Want some?" "Sure," I managed, following her into the kitchen. Everything looked exactly the same. The ceramic owl collection on the windowsill. The cross-stitch sampler that read "Home Sweet Home." The refrigerator covered with photos of our family. Photos of me and Derek on our wedding day. Photos of the boys as toddlers. Photos of all of us together at Christmas, Easter, birthdays. She'd been planning to destroy all of this while surrounding herself with reminders of what she was destroying. "You look tired, honey," she said, pouring tea into glasses decorated with little daisies. "Everything okay?" The concern in her voice sounded so genuine. If I didn't know better, I would have believed she actually cared about my well-being. Just busy with work, I said, accepting the glass. You know how it is. I do. Sometimes I think you work too hard. You should take more time for yourself. She settled into the chair across from me. The same chair where she'd held me when I cried about my father's surgery 2 years ago. Maybe plan a little getaway with Derek. I'd be happy to watch the boys. The audacity was breathtaking. She was suggesting I go away so she could have more time with my husband. That's sweet of you to offer, I said, proud of how normal my voice sounded. But Derek's been so busy at work lately. Lots of late nights, weekend training sessions. You know how dedicated he is. Something flickered across her face, so quickly I almost missed it. Guilt? Fear? Or was she pleased that I was buying the lies? He is dedicated, she agreed. You're lucky to have such a hard-working husband. I am, I said, taking a sip of tea that tasted like poison. Though sometimes I worry he's overworking himself. He's been getting a lot of phone calls lately, even early in the morning. This time, the reaction was unmistakable. Her hand tightened around her glass, and a flush crept up her neck. Oh, she said, trying to sound casual. Work calls. I assume so, though the other day someone called and seemed to think they were talking to him. Said something about forgetting a ring and watch. I watched her face carefully. Strangest thing. The color drained from her cheeks completely. She set down her glass with trembling hands. How odd, she stammered. Isn't it? I mean, who calls someone about jewelry at 7 in the morning? Must have been a wrong number. Must have been, she whispered. We sat in silence for a moment, and I could practically see her mind racing, trying to figure out how much I knew, how much danger she was in. Well, I said, standing up. I should get those gloves and head home. The boys have practice tonight. Of course, she said, jumping up too quickly. They're in the hall closet. As she retrieved the gloves, I noticed her hands were still shaking. When she handed them to me, she couldn't quite meet my eyes. Elena, she said as I reached for the door handle. You know I love you, right? You and the boys and Derek, you're all so important to me. The words hit me like a physical blow. Even now, even caught in her web of lies, she was still trying to manipulate me with declarations of love. I know, I said. Family is everything, right? That's what you always say. Yes, she said, relief flooding her voice. Family is everything. I drove home with the boys' gloves in the passenger seat and rage burning in my chest. She'd looked me in the eye and lied. She'd used my own words about family against me while she was actively destroying mine. But she was scared now. I'd seen it in her face, in her shaking hands, in the way she couldn't maintain eye contact. She knew I suspected something, even if she didn't know how much. That evening, I called Diana. I think she knows I'm on to them, I said, describing the afternoon's encounter. Good, Diana said. Let her sweat. Guilty people make mistakes when they're nervous. But Elena, you need to be extra careful now. If she tells your husband about your conversation, he might become suspicious. What should I do? Act normal. Don't change your routine. And whatever you do, don't confront either of them directly. We're almost ready to move, but we need just a little more time. That night, Derek came home with Chinese takeout and an apologetic smile. Sorry I'm late, he said, kissing my cheek. Crazy day at the clinic. No problem, I said, helping him unpack the containers. How was your day? Anything interesting happen? Not really, just the usual. But I noticed he was avoiding eye contact, and his phone was buzzing more than normal. Oh, Catherine called the clinic, he said casually. Said she talked to you today and you seemed stressed. She's worried about you. There it was. She'd called him immediately after I left, probably in a panic about what I might know. That's sweet of her, I said. I did stop by to get the boys' gloves. We just chatted for a few minutes. She said you asked about my work schedule. About phone calls. My heart hammered, but I kept my voice steady. Did I? I don't remember. I've been so scattered lately with the Morrison wedding shoot. He studied my face for a moment, then seemed to relax. Well, she's just looking out for you. For all of us. She always has. She always has, I agreed. But as we sat down to dinner with the boys, I noticed Derek checking his phone constantly. And when it buzzed during Tyler's story about his science project, I saw the name on the screen before he quickly turned it face down. Catherine. They were in full damage control mode now, trying to figure out how much I knew and what to do about it. But they were too late. Tomorrow, Marcus would deliver his final report. Next week, Diana would file the divorce papers. And soon, very soon, their secret would be secret no more. I smiled at my family around the dinner table. My innocent boys chattering about their day. My lying husband pretending to listen while texting his mistress under the table. Let them panic. Let them scramble. Let them wonder what I knew and when the other shoe would drop. Because when it did, it was going to destroy everything they thought they could get away with. Marcus's final surveillance report arrived on a Friday morning, and it was even more damning than I'd expected. Over 2 weeks, he'd documented 9 meetings between Derek and Aunt Catherine. Hotels, restaurants, even a weekend trip to a bed and breakfast 3 hours away. A trip that coincided with Derek's supposed sports medicine conference. But the most devastating evidence was the audio recording. I was able to place a listening device in your husband's car, Marcus explained during our phone call. It's completely legal since you're married, and it's jointly owned property. What I captured yesterday might be difficult to hear, but it provides definitive proof of the affair. My hands shook as I pressed play on the audio file he'd sent. Derek's voice came through clearly. She's getting suspicious. The way she looked at me when I came home yesterday. And Catherine said she was asking weird questions about phone calls. Then her voice, that familiar voice that had sung me lullabies and comforted me through heartbreak. Maybe we should cool things off for a while. Just until things settle down. No. Derek's voice was firm, almost angry. I'm not giving you up. Not now. I love you, Catherine. I've never felt this way about anyone, not even Elena. The words hit me like a physical blow. Not even Elena. His wife of 9 years, the mother of his children, meant less to him than his affair with my aunt. But what if she finds out? Catherine's voice was worried. What if she tells Margaret? Or the boys? I can't lose my family, Derek. You won't lose them. And even if Elena suspects something, she doesn't have proof. She's not the type to blow up her life over suspicions. They were both wrong about that. I just feel so guilty sometimes, Catherine continued. She trusts me completely. She tells me everything about your marriage, about her fears and hopes, and I sit there and listen and pretend to care While you're what? While you're finally happy. While you're finally with someone who appreciates you the way Frank never has. So that was part of it. Her marriage to Frank had been struggling, and she'd decided my husband was the solution. It's not that simple, she said. Elena is like a daughter to me. I've loved her since she was born. Then why are you doing this? Derek asked, and for a moment he sounded genuinely curious. There was a long pause before she answered. Because I love you more. I stopped the recording and ran to the bathroom where I was violently sick. When I was done, I sat on the bathroom floor and cried until I had no tears left. She loved him more than she loved me. More than she loved my children. More than she loved the family that had embraced her and trusted her and made her part of every important moment in our lives. My phone rang. It was Diana. Did you listen to the recording? She asked. Yes. I'm sorry. I know how hard that must have been. But Elena, this is exactly what we needed. With this evidence, we can proceed with confidence. When? Monday. I'll file the divorce papers first thing Monday morning. But there's something else we need to discuss. Do you want to tell your parents before this becomes public? I'd been dreading this conversation. My mother was going to be devastated. Not just about my marriage ending, but about her sister's betrayal. It would destroy her faith in family, in trust, in everything she'd believed about the people she loved most. My dad already knows. I'll tell my mother this weekend, I said. She deserves to hear it from me. Good. And Elena, you're going to get through this. You're stronger than you know. That weekend, I arranged for the boys to have a sleepover at their friend's house. Then I asked my parents to come over for dinner, saying I had something important to discuss. They arrived at 6 o'clock, Mom carrying a casserole and Dad bringing wine, both of them chattering about their week and asking about the boys. They looked so happy, so blissfully unaware of what was coming. We ate dinner and made small talk, and I memorized Mom's face before I destroyed her peace of mind forever. Mom, Dad, I said when we'd finished eating. I need to tell you something, and it's going to be very difficult to hear. The change in their expressions was immediate. Mom reached for Dad's hand across the table. What is it, Elena? Mom asked. Derek is having an affair, I said simply. I'm filing for divorce on Monday. Mom gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Dad's face darkened with controlled anger. Are you sure? Mom asked. Maybe there's been some misunderstanding. I'm sure, Mom. I have proof. Photos, recordings, everything. Who? Mom asked, her voice deadly quiet. Who is he having an affair with? This was the moment I'd been dreading most. I looked at my mother, at her trusting face and kind eyes, and prepared to break her heart. Aunt Catherine. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom's face went completely white, and for a moment I thought she might faint. No, she whispered. No, that's not possible. Catherine would never. She loves you. She loves our family. I know this is hard to believe. You're wrong. Mom stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. You have to be wrong. Catherine is my sister. She's been my best friend for 50 years. She would never do this to you, to us. Dad reached for her hand, but she pulled away. Margaret, sit down, he said gently. Let Elena explain. There's nothing to explain because it's not true. Mom's voice was rising, becoming hysterical. I know my sister. I know her heart. She would die before she'd hurt Elena. I pulled out my phone and played a portion of the recording. Catherine's voice filled our kitchen. Because I love you more. Mom collapsed back into her chair as if her legs had given out. The sound that came from her throat was barely human. A keening wail of grief and betrayal that I'll never forget. Dad was around the table in seconds, pulling her into his arms while she sobbed against his chest. How long? He asked me over her head. I don't know exactly, but the evidence suggests at least 6 months. I'm going to kill him, Dad said quietly. I'm going to kill them both. Dad, no. We're handling this legally. Diana has everything under control. But he wasn't listening. He was holding his wife while she fell apart, and I could see the rage building in his eyes. 50 years, Mom sobbed. 50 years I've loved her, trusted her, shared everything with her. How could she do this? How could she look me in the eye and lie to me every single day? I didn't have an answer for that. I didn't think there was one. We sat in my kitchen for 2 hours while Mom cried and Dad held her, and I tried to explain everything I'd learned. By the time they left, Mom looked like she'd aged a decade. What do you need from us? Dad asked at the door. Just be there for the boys when this all comes out. They're going to need their grandparents. Always, he said, hugging me tight. We're proud of you, Elena. For being strong, for protecting your children, for not letting them get away with this. After they left, I sat alone in my house and prepared for the war that would begin on Monday. Derek and Aunt Catherine had no idea what was coming. They thought they were safe, that I was too trusting and naive to uncover their betrayal. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Monday morning arrived gray and cold, matching my mood perfectly. I got the boys ready for school like always, made Derek his coffee like always, kissed him goodbye like always. But inside, I was counting down the hours until his world imploded. At 9 a.m. sharp, Diana filed the divorce papers. By 10 a.m., a process server would be waiting at Derek's clinic. By noon, everyone would know that our perfect marriage was over. I was at my computer pretending to work on photo edits when my phone rang at 10:47 a.m. Elena. Derek's voice was shaky, confused. Someone just served me with divorce papers. This has to be a mistake. It's not a mistake, I said calmly. Silence stretched between us, broken only by the sound of his breathing. You know, he said finally. It wasn't a question. I know everything, Derek. The hotels, the phone calls, the lies. All of it. Elena, please let me explain. There's nothing to explain. I heard the recording of you and Catherine in your car. I saw the photos of you together. I know about the credit card charges and the fake names and the weekend trips. Another long silence. What? That's impossible. Nothing's impossible when you hire professionals, Derek. I've known long enough to protect myself and our children. Long enough to make sure you can't hide assets or spin this as anything other than what it is. The boys will be fine. They'll be better off without a father who lies to their mother and destroys their family for his own selfish desires. You can't keep me from my children. I'm not keeping you from them. But I'm also not going to pretend this didn't happen for their sake. They deserve better than parents who live a lie. I could hear him crying now, and part of me, a very small part, felt sorry for him. But mostly I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. Please, he whispered. Can we talk about this? Can we try to work things out? Work things out? I laughed, and it sounded harsh even to my own ears. Derek, you told your mistress that you never loved me the way you love her. You said I wasn't the type to blow up my life over suspicions. You were planning to keep lying to me indefinitely while you carried on with my aunt. What exactly is there to work out? I made a mistake. You made a choice. Every day for months, you chose to betray me and our children. Now you get to live with the consequences. I hung up before he could say anything else. My phone immediately started buzzing with texts and calls. Derek, Aunt Catherine, even my mother, who must have heard from Catherine by now. I ignored them all. At 3:30, when the boys came home from school, I sat them down at the kitchen table with milk and cookies, just like always. Boys, I need to tell you something important, I said, taking their small hands in mine. Daddy and I are getting divorced. Tyler's face crumpled immediately. Mom, did we do something wrong? No, baby. This has nothing to do with you. Sometimes grown-ups make choices that hurt their families, and that's what happened here. Is Daddy moving out? Kyle asked, his voice small. Yes, but he'll still be your father and he'll still love you. That will never change. What about Aunt Catherine? Tyler asked. Will we still see her? I took a deep breath. Aunt Catherine made some very bad choices that hurt our family. We won't be seeing her for a while. They cried, of course. I held them both while they sobbed, and I promised them that we would be okay, that I would take care of them, that their world wasn't ending even though it felt like it was. That evening, Derek came home to pack a bag. The boys were at my parents' house, sparing them the awkwardness of watching their father move out. "Elena," he said when he saw me in the kitchen. "Please, can we just talk?" "Talk," I said, not looking up from the dishes I was washing. I never meant for this to happen. It started as friendship, and then you decided to sleep with my aunt while lying to my face every single day. Do you know how sick that is? I know how it looks. It looks like exactly what it is. A betrayal of everything we built together. He was quiet for a moment. "What about the boys? What about them? I want joint custody. I want to be part of their lives." I finally turned to look at him. "You should have thought about that before you decided your affair was more important than your family. You can't punish the boys because you're angry at me. I'm not punishing anyone. But I'm also not going to pretend you're the same man I married. The boys will see you, but it will be on my terms when I decide they're ready." 3 months later, the divorce was final. Derek got supervised visitation every other weekend. I got the house, primary custody, and enough support to ensure the boys and I would be financially secure. Aunt Catherine tried to contact me dozens of times in those first weeks. She sent letters, emails, even showed up at my door once, crying and begging for forgiveness. I never responded. As far as I was concerned, she was dead to me. My mother struggled the most. She'd lost her sister and her faith in family all at once. But slowly, with Dad's help and counseling, she began to heal. "I keep thinking about all the times she sat in my kitchen and listened to me worry about you and Derek," Mom said one afternoon. "All the times she comforted me when I was concerned about your marriage. She knew exactly what was wrong because she was causing it." "I'm sorry, Mom. I know how much you loved her." I did love her. But the woman I loved never existed, did she? She was just a mask hiding someone who could destroy her own family without a second thought. But here's the twist that no one saw coming, the part that would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. 6 months after the divorce, I heard through mutual friends that Derek and Catherine had broken up. Apparently, the reality of their relationship, without the excitement of secrecy and betrayal, wasn't as thrilling as they'd thought. The affair that destroyed 2 marriages, shattered a family, and left children confused and hurt? It didn't even last a year. They'd thrown away everything: their integrity, their family relationships, the trust of people who loved them, for something so shallow it couldn't survive in the daylight. I felt nothing when I heard the news. No satisfaction, no vindication. Nothing. They'd destroyed my marriage and traumatized my children for a fling that meant so little they couldn't even make it work when they finally had their chance. But the boys and I were thriving. We'd moved forward, built a new life, learned to trust our instincts again. Tyler and Kyle were resilient in the way children are, adapting to their new normal with the help of therapy and the unwavering support of my parents. Derek tried to come back, of course. Started showing up at school events, sending flowers, leaving voicemails about how he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. How he realized now that what we had was real, and what he'd had with Catherine was just an illusion. Too little, too late. Catherine tried too. She wrote letters that I threw away unopened. She called my mother, begging for a chance to explain, to apologize, to somehow undo the damage she'd caused. Mom hung up on her every time. "Some bridges once burned can never be rebuilt," Mom told me. "Some betrayals are too deep to forgive." As for me, I was stronger than I'd ever imagined I could be. I'd faced the worst betrayal possible, and not only survived it but thrived. I'd protected my children and built a better life for all of us. I learned that sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones capable of hurting you the deepest. But I also learned that I was strong enough to survive anything, even the destruction of everything I thought I knew about love and family. The woman who answered that phone call on that terrible Tuesday morning was gone. In her place was someone harder, wiser, and infinitely more careful about who she trusted. But also someone who knew without a doubt that she could handle whatever life threw at her next. 2 years later, I stood in my kitchen making breakfast for the boys, sunlight streaming through the same window where this nightmare had begun. But everything else had changed. The house felt lighter now, free from the weight of lies and deception. The boys were happy and healthy, thriving in their new reality. They saw Derek every other weekend, and while those visits were sometimes difficult, they were learning to navigate their relationship with their father on their own terms. My phone rang, a sound that no longer filled me with dread. "Hello. Mom, it's me," Tyler's voice, calling from his friend's house where he'd spent the night. "Can Jason come over for lunch?" "Of course, baby. I'll make grilled cheese." "Thanks, Mom. Love you." "Love you too." I hung up and smiled. Such a simple conversation, but it represented everything I'd fought for. A peaceful home where my children felt safe and loved, where phone calls brought joy instead of devastation. The doorbell rang, and I opened it to find a delivery man with a bouquet of sunflowers. "Elena Cross?" he asked. "That's me." I took the flowers, curious. The card read, "Thank you for showing me what real courage looks like. Sarah." Sarah was a woman I'd met in Diana's waiting room 8 months ago, going through her own divorce after discovering her husband's affair with her best friend. I'd shared my story with her, offered support and encouragement. Apparently it had helped. As I arranged the flowers in a vase, I reflected on how much my life had changed. I'd started a support group for women going through divorce, particularly those dealing with betrayal by family members or close friends. I'd discovered a strength I never knew I had, and I was using it to help others find their own. The boys burst through the door, full of energy and weekend plans, and I realized something profound. I was happy. Genuinely, deeply happy in a way I hadn't been even before I discovered the affair. Because this happiness was mine, built by me, for me and my children. It wasn't dependent on anyone else's choices, or lies or betrayals. Derek and Catherine had thought they could destroy me, that discovering their betrayal would break me beyond repair. Instead, it had revealed a strength I never knew I possessed. They'd lost everything, their families, their reputations, each other, while I'd gained something invaluable. The knowledge that I was strong enough to rebuild from the ashes and create something beautiful. I'd answered a phone call that destroyed my world. But in the end, it had given me something better. The truth and the power to build a life worthy of it. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing that could have happened. Because it shows you who you really are when everything else is stripped away. And who I really was. Someone who refused to be a victim of other people's choices. Someone who chose to rise.